Hey, everybody, welcome to the Drummers Education Network. Dan, I'm here with three of my best friends, three of the greatest drummers and educators in the world. And we've got a topic for you today. It's mistakes that drum teachers make. And it's a pleasure to be here with all of you guys. We've got Chip Ritter in
Hi,
Tucson,
everybody.
Arizona. Yeah, hey, Chip. And we've got the amazing Bart Ropley up in the Fullerton area,
Hello,
and
hello,
Jeremy
hello.
Steinkohler up in the Bay Area.
Hey, everybody.
All right. We're so happy that you guys are all joining us. And, together we have over 200 years of experience. We're all professional drum teachers and musicians. So to be there, we've all made a lot of mistakes. So
A
we've
lot.
grown from all of our mistakes, and we just like to be able to be a resource for you to share knowledge that we have with you. Not to be preachy and say, do it this way, because I tell you what, I've seen people make lots of mistakes, but they still move forward and and have success. So anyway, who'd like to go first on this? Raise your hand. Who wants to throw out an idea of a mistake that a drum teacher should avoid? Chip.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chip Ritter, and I think one of the common mistakes drum teachers make, or one that I made in the beginning of my teaching, was not having a clear curriculum laid out, not really being clear on where to take somebody who's just looking to me for blank advice. Where do I go from here? After I learn how to hold the sticks and I start playing, where are we going to go? I think having a curriculum or a set of books or a library, even more preferably, is a great move to avoiding the mistake of not having a clear curriculum.
Yeah, I just want to start by saying I'm so happy to learn from you guys about all the mistakes you've made because I've never made any mistakes, so I don't even know what
Me
that
either.
feels like.
Not once. Never.
Of course not. Of course. Yeah. I mean, mistakes are how we learn, right? I think the most important thing about the mistakes that you make as an instructor is that you're willing to learn from them and put in the time to figure out things that you could have done better and that you're always working on becoming a better and more effective teacher. I've been doing this for what, 20, 30 years now and teaching.
Wow.
And I still feel like I learn all the time from my students, from my fellow educators, from YouTube, from reading, from playing, practicing. So to echo what Chip said and take it another step, I think, a lot of times, you have two different scenarios when you get new students. You either got a student who's a complete beginner, has never played the drums before, or you've got someone coming into you who's already been playing for a little while, or maybe a long time. Maybe they're a semi-professional player even. Um, and if you don't have a plan for how to help people based on where they're at, you're going to be kind of throwing darts and kind of casting in the dark or whatever. So if someone comes into me and they say, "Oh, I'm playing these songs, but I feel like my right foot can't quite nail these figures. I've always got to simplify the bass drum part because I can't play it." Well, I'm going to put them through bass drum control. I'm going to put them through either Funky Primer or some rock beat book to work on that right foot technique and get those double 16 notes happening. So having a plan, having a curriculum, that's critical to your success.
Completely. I know one of the things that I've run into, and whenever I talk about mistakes, obviously I've got to look within. Most of the time, when you're talking about a student, the mistakes usually are made from from here. It's not the student. Um, you guys will forgive me. I've got to go around my elbow to get to my thumb on this one. But one of the things that I know that I've run into is this. Um, as a professional player and teacher and stuff, I'm sitting at my drum set right now. Um, I spend many hours sitting right here working on a piece of music. Sometimes it's a song, it's a snare drum etude. Maybe it's one measure within a song to get a part right, going from the verse to the chorus. Whatever it is, you break it down into these little finite things. And when you do that, I think that it can do one of two things for you. It can be soul crushing because you know what to do, but you can't do it. And as we've talked before, when you're practicing, you're not supposed to sound good. When you're playing drums, you're supposed to sound good, but when you're practicing, not so much. You're not supposed to sound good. So I don't have any problem sitting here practicing over and over and over, again until something is perfected to the best that I can do it. But as a teacher, what I've found is that I can't get tunnel vision. In the past, I have, and I'm very aware of it now. What I mean by that is for me, when I'm having a hard time with something, it strengthens my resolve. It's like, okay, I'm gonna get this part. It's not gonna get the best of me. I don't care if it takes a year. I'm gonna get this part. With a student, you can tell sometimes when a student understands something and they're right at the cusp of playing it correctly. They're right there. There's one little subdivision within a phrase that they're messing up, but they're right there. You just need to push them up over the top of the hill, right? They're just one more time and you got it. Just, okay, that was great. Do it one more time. Okay, you got the, you're so close. Count. Good. And you're doing all this stuff to coach the kid along or the adult along, right? Somebody that's been playing for a while. They're right there. And you're so focused on the part in the music, you're not focused on them. And then finally they get it and you're like, yeah, that was it. Well, you look over and it's a little 8-year-old kid, and the waterworks are going. And oh God, that kills me because I wasn't being, I wasn't paying attention to the kid. Or it's an adult, same thing, an adult student, and they're right there. They're just about ready to get this, no matter what the subject matter is. And you're not focusing on them. You're focusing on the part as if you were the one learning it. You're not the one learning it. You're the one teaching it. So make sure you're really, for me, be aware of the student. Be aware of the student and how they're feeling, and really be attentive to what they're feeling about trying to play the part. And I mean, I'm sure that's happened to you guys where you have a student and they cry, they break down and cry, or they get so frustrated, and you gotta, I've found that for me, that's where I have to really be aware, because those are where I make my mistakes sometimes, or is stuff like that.
That's a really great point, Bart. I think a lot of teachers get so focused on the way that they learn, the way that the way that things make sense to them, that they don't put themselves in the student's shoes. They don't think about the beginner's mind and how
It's hard
difficult.
to take the ego out of the equation. Yeah.
Yes, exactly right.
Yeah.
And it's not about how you learn as a teacher. It's not about what makes sense to you. It's about what makes sense to them. And a lot of times you may have to, I find myself sometimes explaining the same idea, the same concept, multiple ways until I see that one of those ways hits with my student. Like, oh, now I get it. When you put it that way, it made sense to me,
Yes.
But all the other ways that would have made sense to me from the get-go didn't jive with them, right? So it's all about figuring out the way that they need to learn so that you can be more effective as a teacher to help them. That's what you're here to do, right? You're not here to make them into clones of you. You're here to help them on their path with whatever strengths and weaknesses and learning issues or challenges, whatever they have. And so it's all about being dialed into the student, just like you said, Bart.
That's right. Yeah, you have to be fluid in how you're going to teach that student. You've got to come up with lots of different ways to get to that end result. And then I think you have to realize that there's no drum police. There's no law that says you have to do it this way, that you have to teach it. You have to just teach rudiments, and that's what you have to do. Nothing against rudiments. But I think a teacher should really be themselves too, and teach a curriculum that they're good at teaching, which hopefully is a wide variety of things that they can present and have available to a student. But if just because you saw a great drum teacher teach a certain way, someone that you admire, doesn't mean that you have to mirror that exact way of teaching. So if you want to learn all the techniques of all the greatest drum teachers, Dom Famulero might be the best guy for you to go study with. And that doesn't mean that we all have to teach exactly like Dom Famulero. I think everybody's got to find their thing that they're really good at teaching at, and then be able to realize, okay, it's time for me to pass the football. I think I'm going to recommend this guy for Jeremy for jazz, or Chip, you want to learn showmanship? Well, I'll help you a little bit, but you should study with Chip Ritter if you want to learn something about showmanship. That's the guy.
Right.
Yeah. So
I think sometimes too, like, when we talk about adult students, I think like what you said, Rick, not being, you can't have your heels dug in and just kind of, be the fly pecking at the window, expecting to get through or around the window. You've got to find a way to get around the window or under it or over it. And as teachers, you've got to find, here's the problem, and it's your job to figure out how to get around that problem to explain it to the student. And Chip, I like what you said, take the ego out of the way, because it's not at that point about, when somebody's coming to you for drum lessons, they're coming to you because of your knowledge, right? That's they want that. One of the things, like, I'll give you an example outside of, I had a student that was, I got a keyboard here on my snare drum, so I can't really play, but I had a student that was having a heck of a time landing the last note of a 16th note on the kick drum. 1, 2, 3, and 4. They couldn't get it. They'd always end up on the 8th note or on the quarter note. They'd end up on the and beat of 2 or on 3. Like, no, it's the beat. So what I tell them is, like, think about, let's visualize for a minute. We have physical 8th notes in the room, right? Physical 8th notes. They're made out of titanium, and they're cut with a laser, and a micrometer has put them, in exact 1 foot increments apart. That's 12 inches. You want to land that 16th note right at the 6-inch mark, right in between, and bing, they got it, and they could play at that point. Problems like that, things like that, you've got to sometimes, I think outside of the box. And I think the mistake in that would be to not think that way, to think that everybody is going to understand, subdivisions. They're not. You have to be able to break it down like that. At least that's what I found. Does that make
What
sense to you
about
guys?
day-to-day stuff, guys? Just some day-to-day business, like cancellation policies. And do you guys have anything that you guys do?
I wrote
that
down
you'd recommend for that?
one of the big mistakes drum teachers make, where we're not being very clear about the payment and the cancellation policies up front with the people that are booking the lessons. That's one thing that I've had to learn the hard way. And nowadays, one of the first things I go into is very fiercely and very adamantly explain very clearly what my payment policy is and cancellation policy is. I think that's a mistake I made many times in the past by not being clear about it. And so the suggestion or the take home for me is, be very clear about your payment policies.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Do you require payment in advance, or is it just
I require payment in advance of the first lesson. When we start lesson, the payment is due during the lesson or the day of the first lesson.
I have students pay for a month at a time up at the beginning of the month. And if they end up canceling anything within my window of allowable cancellations, they get a credit for the following month.
What I do is you pay me up front for the month, and you pay me for whatever you're going to be there for and whatever I'm going to be there for. So if there's 4 Tuesdays in a month and we're doing it on Tuesday, you pay me for 4. If there's 5, you pay me for 5. If you cancel a lesson and you give me 24 hours notice, I will give you a makeup. It has to be done within that month. And and this was obviously before COVID, when I was seeing everybody in person and you're in a close proximity, I tell the student and the parents, if you wake up and little Johnny's, got the flu and, there's snot and boogers and everything coming out, I'm self-employed. I don't want that. So if you cancel and they're sick, I'll give you a makeup. But if it's all of a sudden starts being a habit where it's like, he doesn't practice and, I got the flu, then, we'll have an issue. But I always make sure people pay me up front, and I'm pretty good about trying to give makeups, because one of the mistakes that I've seen drum teachers make where they shoot, or teachers, just music teachers that get paid on that method, make is they get paid in advance for a lesson, and then they dig their heels in on not giving a makeup, and they lose the students. So sometimes I think it's better to lose the battle and win the war. I don't know.
You know what I do is I establish the policy right away, and then I send a text out which establishes the entire policy. And I think everybody's got to be fluid in what's going to work for them as far as cancellations go. and payment processes. I've had a little bit of luck, well, actually a lot of luck in having people pay as they go. I feel like a lot of them felt like it wasn't as much of a financial strain. And I have people who come in, I might see, twice a month or every 3 weeks, and they'll take a lesson, when they have the money. And so I'm okay with some of that pay as you go, but I have a 2-day cancellation policy. Um,
Me too.
and then and then I try to be flexible if they can't make it, to give them an option. But in addition to that policy, I also added a little hearing protection clause that they're responsible for their own hearing protection. Um, my in my studio we're both on kits and it's really loud in here, and so I want to make sure no one ever comes back firing at me saying, "Hey man, my ears are ringing," or "I lost my hearing." And so I have them I put in this little text to them with the cancellation policy that they're responsible for their own hearing protection, and then they've got to agree to that if we're going to continue with lessons.
I think the important thing is not so much what your policy is that you have a policy and you're clear about it, and
Being
that you
clear
Yeah,
about
Right.
and that you
yeah, being
communicate with
clear.
the
Yeah.
students from the get-go what it is. Because otherwise, you may have this policy in your mind and then your students flake or whatever it is, and they're like, hey, you can't do that, or you owe me for this. And well, you never were clear about it. So put it in writing, send an email, send a text.
Hmm.
Don't just tell them. So that way you have a record of it. Well, look, you agreed to it. Here it is. And in the email I sent you back in the beginning, you knew that if you canceled within 48 hours, you were going to pay for the lesson. So, you know, that's the deal.
That's great.
Hey,
What about
Jeremy.
what about a
Yeah.
mission statement? Do any of you guys have like a mission statement for your students? This is what is expected. Do any of you guys do that kind of thing?
I don't have a mission statement, but I do.
Oh.
This to me dovetails with an idea about being clear about your expectations of them. And I'm always clear about what my expectations are from them in terms of how much they practice, and that they come prepared for their lessons. And I talk to the parents a lot, so I have an ally dealing with the kids about, trying to help them motivate to practice. And, you know, yeah, I think that's really important, because otherwise, if you just give them material and say go work on it, they don't know how much to work on it. I used to do that when I was first starting. I didn't know what I was doing, and students would come back. Yeah, I practiced this beat. How many times did you practice it? Oh, like 4 or 5 times.
That's another thing I wrote down is not having realistic expectations of giving students too much homework. One of the mistakes drum teachers make is they hand out way too much homework in relation to what that specific student can actually handle.
Agreed. I had that written
Mhm.
down.
Yeah.
The exact same thing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
What's
Totally, I
another
agree with
mistake
that.
drum teachers make? I was
Well,
gonna
waiting
say
for
I
the
was
phone
gonna
to
say
ring.
booking too many students. I
Hey,
Overbooking.
Mark.
overloaded
That could
myself
happen.
in the beginning when I started teaching, and I took on more than I could handle. And I don't know, maybe that's not a mistake in today's day and age.
I think that you have to know your limitations, and that's whether it's like too many students. Yeah, if I've got, if I have this much energy for this amount of time for this many days a week and you've overbooked yourself, the only thing you're doing is a disservice to the kid that you've been teaching from 1 o'clock to 8 o'clock, and the person that comes in at 8 o'clock, you're like, okay, let's hear some paradiddles.
I have made that mistake before.
Yeah, and so yeah, that's great. Don't spread yourself too thin, um, because I don't think there's one student is more important than the other. Everybody deserves the best you that you can give them. So
You know,
yeah, that's definitely something that is a it could be definitely problematic for sure.
another mistake I've seen teachers make is that they give students material that is like way above their level. I've
Yeah.
had students
Hmm.
come to me from other teachers and show me what they were working on, and I was like, "Are you kidding me? Like you're working on these,
Hmm.
polyrhythms in five and nested, septuplets, and like you can't even like play time.
Yeah.
You need to work on these fundamental skills first." So no, that kind of goes back to having a plan and all, but like just I think some teachers like to give stuff because it's hard or
Oh
esoteric.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's like that serves no purpose except for to frustrate your students and to demotivate them, because they're going to be grinding their wheels trying to get this stuff that's not even relevant to what they should be working on.
Don't teach the black
So many
page
students
during
who've
the
come
first
to me who've
lesson.
taken other lessons. Sorry, Bart, what was that?
Oh, I just said don't teach the black page on your first lesson to a student. I was joking.
Yeah. Yeah, I've encountered this so much that people have studied and with a studied with someone, and they'll come in and they'll bring their lesson plan and they say, yeah, I just sort of peaked out. and it is because they were taught stuff that maybe the drum teacher themselves is still working on, but stuff
Right.
that's way over their
Right.
head, and actually stuff that I think is kind of useless.
Yeah.
I think you want to I'd recommend teaching people to be able to play a groove and get ready for your average gig
Yep.
first, rather than start working on crazy polyrhythmic stuff. And I think it gets fueled by the Instagram culture right now too, where
Yeah.
everybody's riffing like crazy, but nobody's out there grooving.
That's right.
So I think bring it all down
Well,
and
grooving,
to a level where
if
they
you
can
just
grow
do some
incrementally.
grooving, it really gets a lot less views than shredding.
Oh, completely. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
It's all
do you
about
want
views.
yeah, do you want views or do you want to work?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
You know what? I
Exactly.
did
Yeah.
a on that note, as far as, realistic drumming, the subtitle to my book is Advice from a Real World Drummer. And
Mhm.
my whenever I was doing a drum clinic for a while that was based upon all the stuff that I learned working with Michael Blum in the recording studio and all the re-records that I did. And I basically was drumming karaoke. I would go in and I had 5 songs. I explained the songs. I explained what went into recording the songs and how I had to transcribe the songs for the recordings, how I recorded them, and I would play. And I got more students from those lessons. And I always heard that, I would go see drummer X over at the drum clinic, and they just intimidated me. There's no way I was going to go ask this guy for lessons. And I'm up there grooving and playing a song, and I got a lot of students out of it. So I think
Mhm.
that, yeah, shredding will get you a lot of views, and it'll get a lot of drummers that goes, wow, I wish I could do that. But that's not, you're not, I don't think you're doing anything but serving your ego there.
Well,
Like you said.
that goes back to having a
Mhm.
clear path and being very clear about what you're giving the student. And
Right.
what we also said, I like this conversation we had because one of the mistakes that we also covered at great detail in this video earlier is not being aware of the student at the time, where the student is during the lesson with the piece of music that they're trying to play. That goes back to that mistake. And the answer is pay attention to the student and where they are at any given time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Another idea that goes right along hand in hand with that is making sure that your students understand what you're telling them. I
Mhm.
think there's a lot of teachers who they have their spiel, they've got their program, and they go through it, and they just sort of assume that the student's understanding, and they're using words that the student may not understand, vocabulary, and concepts and coordination patterns that maybe they can. And so I always make sure, always, like constantly during every lesson, does this make sense? You understand what I'm saying? Show me
Mhm.
what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Demonstrate to me that you understand what I'm saying.
And
So
that
that I know.
mistake is not being clear enough.
Yeah, right. And not checking in for understanding, to
Yes.
ensure, because a lot of times when there's 2 different reasons why students won't be able to play something that you're trying to get them to play. Either one, they don't understand it, in which case, of course, they can't play it. Or 2, they understand it, but they can't physically execute it yet. And those are 2 different problems. And as a
Mhm.
teacher, I think it's easy to sort of miss that those are 2 different problems.
Or
You got
3, that they don't want to because somehow they didn't connect with what we were talking about in the first place.
Right, a motivational issue, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they sort of shut down from the get-go because
I can't help but say that, Jeremy. Sorry to interject, but with my younger
No.
students, sometimes I'm talking in great detail. I'm excited about this new thing that we're going to be doing. And I'm looking at this kid and their eyes just glaze over because I've completely missed the mark. I have missed where they are. And I made that mistake that drum teachers make and not being very clear where we are at the given time.
Right. I'm
Yeah.
glad you interjected. That's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So again,
Do you guys have any thoughts on generating new business, I see a common mistake out there is just waiting for the phone to ring. And
Oh yeah.
it's just not gonna happen. You've got to go out there and get it. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I think in today's world with YouTube and social media and the thing that Chip originally turned me on to, Google My Business, Yelp, all these different platforms to promote yourself. I definitely think in being a good business person, you have got to be the person that screams your voice the loudest from the top of the mountain. I mean, because nobody's going to do it for you. Um, the dog that's running around in the yard barking the loudest is the one that's going to get the attention. So I definitely think you have to not be afraid to push yourself. You have to learn about self you know, promotion for sure. I think self promotion is a huge thing if you're going to run a business.
One of the
Like
things
that
I
puppy
found,
waiting to be adopted, right? The puppy,
Exactly, exactly.
roof, 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 pick me.
Yeah,
one of the
Sorry,
things
Chip.
I found very helpful when I was at a time, if I'm ever at a place where I'm lacking students or I've lost a couple have taken off, I need to fill the roster. Anytime that I'm in that position, one of the things I've learned is to preach to the choir. I go through my past waiting list. I go through my phone contacts of people that have taken lessons in the past before, and I kind of go back through that and I reinvigorate the base. Some students that have fallen off in the past really appreciated a phone call from me and have started taking lessons again before. So one suggestion I have is preach to the choir.
great idea.
Hmm.
That's a really good idea. One
Yeah,
of the
I made a
things.
Facebook group
Oh, go ahead.
of all of my students. It's just a private group for all of the different students, whether they're still with me or not, and it helps keep in touch. And what I try to do is just provide content, something useful, a lesson or a tip. And I found that many people have kind of come back into the fold because they kind of are part of that community.
That's
So,
cool.
what
That's
were you going to
that's
say, Bart?
awesome. That's awesome. I love that. That's cool.
Cool.
Hey, I've got a question for you
Oh,
guys. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Bart.
I apologize. What I was gonna kind of touch on in being aware of the student was something that everybody's kind of said here. I just wanted to echo it a little bit. I've had a lot of students that have come to me that hey, I was taking drum lessons with so and so, and like Rick said, maybe they fell off for whatever reason. I had and Jeremy, what you said, here's a kid that's brand new to drumming, and they're trying to teach them the black page or something crazy. It's like, why are you, you know let's start from point A, not point Z. I had a student one time that this kid was the polar opposite of that. This kid could play. He couldn't read. He was one of those. He was a total parrot. He could see somebody do it and do it, and he had chops. He was a drum corps guy, but he couldn't read, so he wanted to come to me to read. And so we started working on stuff, and he told me a story. He goes, "Yeah, I took drum lessons with this guy for like a year." And he goes, "Every drum lesson, all we did was play Billie Jean." And I'm like, "What? Really?" And he goes, "Yeah, every drum lesson, the drum teacher, I'd walk in and sit down. Okay, let me hear what you got." And he would just put on Billie Jean, and the drum student would sit there for 30 minutes and play Billie Jean for a year. And I think there's a point too where that's a case of a drum teacher that either didn't care or just was not in the loop at all with a student and wasn't aware of this kid's ability. And I always question, why would you do that? So that's kind of the opposite of what you guys were saying, where you have to be aware of, okay, yeah, I would never do something like that, like just have the person play the same thing over and over again. But how to move along, how to, when do you let a student go? When do you, before they leave frustrated because they're not getting enough? So
Right.
there's
Well,
the opposite.
that just speaks to I mean, you can sort of kill both of those birds with one stone if you just think about your job as a teacher being to challenge them
Yeah.
and also keep them feeling successful, right? Because if you're not challenging them and they're bored, they're going to give up because they're not going anywhere. On the other hand, if you're challenging them too much and they're not being successful, that's frustrating. They're going to quit. But if you always just keep pushing the bar a little bit higher appropriately, you're going to keep.
That's a great mistake drum teachers make. Not challenging the student enough, and not being as encouraging enough as they could be at the same time. Great point, Jeremy.
Thank you. Yeah.
Rick, you were going to ask something a minute ago.
Oh, I was.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Rick, did you have something? I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to talk about. I've seen a lot of teachers who don't read music say, "I really want to start giving lessons right now," and one of the things I think you have to ask yourself is do you really like teaching? Do you want to teach? Should you be teaching? If is it just going to be something so you can make some money? Because I just think it's somewhat of a disservice to be out there offering lessons if it's something that you really hate doing. And then I've also seen a lot of teachers try who don't read music. And we had a great roundtable on benefits of reading music. But boy, if you want to teach, I really think that learning to read music is really, really going to help out. If you guys have any thoughts on that?
Yeah.
When I got thrown into teaching back in the day, and it forced me to learn go back into my high school reading days, and the learning curve was steep. But yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. If you're not 100% into teaching and getting passionate about the results, you shouldn't be doing it. If you don't absolutely love it, get out now.
Yeah, completely. I had a drum lesson that I took one time. Won't say the guy's name. He was a extremely famous drummer, and he was at the end of an era, and the band dissolved, and he was really good at something that I wanted to learn how to do. And he was advertising that he had his new book out, and he was taking private students. And I was like, I'm in. And so I drove way out to Apple Valley, which is halfway between here and Las Vegas, and I paid all the money. I went to the guy's house. We walked down this long hallway. His garage was converted into a studio. Whole bunch of gold records on the wall. Very impressive. We sit down to play, and the guy couldn't read his own book. He had ghostwritten it with somebody else,
Wow.
and he's like trying to explain to me how to read the book, and it was apparent like right now. And I drove all that way out there, and I paid all the money for this lesson. This was years ago, and I think it was $100 for the lesson because of his name. And I walked away from the lesson, and he even said, "You're an advanced player, and you helped me know how to read my book." He told me that, and he still took the damn check from me. So it's apparent right away,
man,
that if you're going to teach somebody how to do something, you have to know how to speak the language. That's a mistake that I've paid for, literally. If you don't want to teach, like Chip said, we've said this in past videos, don't do it. If you are going to teach, if you're going to teach drums, and I come to a drum teacher and I'm like, "Hey, look, I'm trying to play this subdivision. How's it go?" And they go, "What's a subdivision?" You're with the wrong person. I mean, if you're going to teach something, know the language.
And I might add this, like, be honest. Like, if there have been times when students have come to me and asked me about something and I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
And I'll say that. That's a great question. You know what? I don't know, but I promise you I will know by next week.
Yeah. Yep, exactly.
Well, do you guys have anything to offer in closing?
I had a question for you guys, and we don't have to answer this question, but it occurred to me it might be kind of cool for aspiring drum teachers to hear from us who've been doing this kind of a long time. What's the worst mistake you feel like you've ever made as a drum teacher in relation to teaching drums? Like I said, don't have to answer.
Mine is easy. Having somebody bring a song to me that's so far over their head, but they really, really want to learn that song. And I'm all for, like, let's have a goal and work for something tough, but just having them have an unrealistic expectation, and then me trying to go for it rather, okay, well, we'll go on, we'll do that song, and then see them get frustrated. So um, I'll encourage somebody to, okay, if you have a song, we'll try to maybe do a student version of it, but I kind of like to be in charge and control the lesson a little bit in hopes of that they're going to grow incrementally at a pace that's going to keep it enjoyable and keep them inspired rather than having them get frustrated.
Yeah.
The worst,
What about you, Chip?
the worst mistake I ever made as a drum teacher was trying to keep a drum student that didn't want to be there and not being able to get honest with the parents and myself and being unaware because my ego was so tunnel vision and so assuming that they wanted to be there. I could not see that they really didn't even want to do that. I mean, bottom line, getting to that point of realizing when a student really doesn't want to be there and doesn't want to be playing drums and is just doing this because their parents thought it was a great idea and everybody thought it was great for a while, but that point had been reached where it was kind of obvious or should have been obvious to me had I been more aware of the situation. That's probably the worst mistake I've made.
Okay, Jeremy, you asked the question.
Oh,
What's yours?
Oh,
I haven't answered it yet, but what's,
I remember there was one student, he was probably like 10 years old, and he was a good kid, and his mom came in maybe the fourth or fifth lesson, said something about him being dyslexic, which would have been a good thing for me to know from the get-go. And she said something like, "Isn't that a blessing?" Or something like that. And I sort of loosely, offhandedly said, "Oh, it's more of a curse in relation to drumming." And I didn't even think about it when I said it, but then she called me a few days later and said, "Look, I just want you to know, like my kid was devastated when you said that." And I felt awful, just had been so kind of glib and careless about, you know, this thing that was pretty serious for him and how it might affect his drumming. So that was a lesson for me, and just being really, really thoughtful and realizing that my words had a really big impact could potentially have a really big impact on students.
Not being aware of how much a role model you really are if you're a drum teacher in life, just by proximity.
Yep.
Sometimes there are some students where I'm the only male influence in their life, and I have to be very clear and very careful about what I say. That's a great example, Jeremy. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
How about you, Bart?
what's up?
What's your worst mistake as a drum teacher you ever made?
I think the worst mistake that I ever made as a drum teacher is kind of along the lines of not understanding that somebody didn't understand something, and I was under I think it was Rick or maybe all four of us had said I was assuming that the student knew what I was talking about, and it was an adult student. This guy could play. He was a really good drummer, and he came to me to work on rudiments, and he came to me to work on reading. Those were the two things he wanted to work on. And so I knew where I was going to jump in after I listened to him play a little bit, and I knew what we were going to work on. And I was throwing, just like we were talking about, I was talking music, I was talking the language, and he had no idea what I was talking about. I was just, and instead of him saying, "Hey, look, I don't get that," I just kind of assumed that he did, and I felt really bad about that, because then it made this guy, who's a great drummer and a great player, feel really bad, because he's like, well, I've been playing for all these years, I should know what that is. And it's like, no, that's why you came to me. So I think it's just assuming that somebody knew something that they didn't, and
Don't make assumptions.
yeah, don't make assumptions. Make sure
you,
that
Rick?
Well, I tell you what, we're all human. That's for sure. And with this many lessons under our belts, I'm sure we've all made lots of mistakes. But this is the beautiful thing about the Drummers Education Network and the community that we're trying to build, that we're all cohesive, we're all a team, we're all here for each other, we're all love sharing ideas, and we just want to elevate the spirit of drumming and elevate this community. So we really appreciate anybody who's watched this. and we're here for you. So feel free to contact us, everybody out there. Any of us, we're happy to do a consultation with you. Contact us all privately on if you want some help in building up your business. And it's really cool. I think what you'll find is you're going to find lots of different things that work. So it's a good idea to talk to everybody and learn from everybody, and then apply that experience to what works for you.
Yeah.
So it's an honor
Exactly.
to be here with you guys. You guys
Likewise.
are a wealth of information, and you're just all quality, beautiful people. And it's an honor to be here.
Back at you, Rick. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. I feel like I learned talk about learning and always learning. I've learned from you guys every week and every time we talk about stuff. Always so much great experience and wisdom. So thank you guys.
I feel the same way, man. I really look forward to Tuesdays and doing these videos and putting them up and just talking to you guys. You guys are awesome. I agree, man. Every time I walk away from one of these meetings, it's like, wow, I never thought of it that way. So, this is
Beautiful.
awesome. Good stuff, guys.
All
So
right.
remember,
Thanks.
all you future drum teachers, remember what was discussed in this video and be very clear. Be very clear and be aware.
Be very aware. Be very aware.
All right, everybody, go out there and get some drumming in. Have some fun
Nice.
with it.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Bye,
See you
everybody.
next
Everybody.
week.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.